Hello and welcome to The Resourceful Woman. Today I am going to be showing you a shirt that I made based off of a shirt that I saw recently, Bernadette Banner's pirate shirt. I really enjoy her videos. I super enjoyed her pirate shirt video, so it looked fairly straightforward and I thought that I would give it a go myself. Now, if you are a fan of Bernadette Banner, you know that her whole thing is doing things to a correct historical method, which involves a lot of hand sewing and using the correct fabrics and everything. If you watch me, you know that my whole thing is all about reducing waste and finding ways to recycle and upcycle. So instead of sewing this whole thing by hand, what I'm doing is repurposing an old bed sheet. Now, this actually goes back to last March, just before lockdown started. I passed a house that was clearly having a big clear out, and they had a huge skip in front that they were just putting all kinds of furniture and broken glassware and just all kinds of random homewares. And in amongst everything else, there were a whole lot of old bed sheets, which by the time I got to them had been out in the rain and were muddied and dirtied. But I dug them out of a skip because I thought, oh, hey, here's a whole bunch of fabric that could be useful for making bunting or, who knows, quilts, whatever kind of projects that might occur to me somewhere along the way. So I brought all these sheets home, and of course I washed them and, I've added them to my whole fabric stash. And so when I saw this pirate shirt thing, I thought, oh, hey, why not give it a try, but give it a try with a bit of fabric that I don't mind messing up or having it go wrong. So I use this kind of, I don't know if you would call this color, would you call it orange, would you call it rust? It really kind of, I suppose, depends on what light you're looking at it. Yeah, it's definitely not my color. It's really not even my fabric. I don't love the feel of this, but it was great for actually using this as a kind of a test run to see how this pattern works. And as you will see going forward, it took a lot of trial and error of stop and start and unpick and try again. But yeah, in the end, I did this pirate shirt out of an old bed sheet, and I hope you enjoy watching this. I used this pattern from the Bernadette Banner video with a couple of small adjustments to account for my particular measurements. I laid out the sheet, measured and drew the dimensions of each piece with a water-soluble fabric pencil. I'm a big believer in measure twice, cut once, so after I had drawn out all of my rectangles, I went back over everything with the quilting ruler to check that everything was correct. In Bernadette Banner's world, she carefully unpicks a straight line and a beautiful length of linen in order to get her cuts perfectly straight. In my world, I pull an old sheet out of a skip, I don't even bother ironing the material after I've washed it, and I use stone coasters as fabric weights to keep the sheet from slipping off the table. I will say that in spite of the problems which I shortly encountered, this method of doing everything in squares and rectangles made getting to this point incredibly fast and easy. Deceptively fast and easy, because at that point I thought I might have this done in a day. Ha! I started by sewing the shoulder seams, and even here I screwed up because I almost sewed all the way across the open neck area. Fortunately, I caught myself in time and adjusted my pins. I decided that I needed to use this project to challenge myself on something I'd never done before: French seams. For the uninitiated, a French seam is where you sew the seams twice, first with the wrong sides facing, then with the right sides facing, so that the seams on the inside of the garment are tucked away and very neat. I figured that since I was working with a bunch of straight lines on a pretty straightforward pattern, this was a good place to try out this method and get comfortable with it. Here you can see that I've sewed the shoulder seam the wrong way around first, then trimmed off as much of the seam as I could, and now I'm sewing it again on the other side to create the French seam. Once the shoulder seams were done, I gave it a quick try-on to check that it was working so far. I used my super scientific method here to determine how big I should make the armholes. From there, I could determine where to put the sleeve gussets. After watching the Banner video a few times, I felt fairly confident that I knew how to place these. The trouble was in figuring out how to place them while doing French seams. There was a lot of unpinning and trying again to get everything sewn the right way around. A thing I learned from this, which I recommend to others going forward, is to sew the entire garment inside out first, then go back and trim and sew the seams a second time. At some point in here, I realized that the sleeve width given in the Banner video of 20 inches was not going to cut it for me. I would barely be able to get it around my shoulder and attached to the gusset with no poof or give at all. So I went back to the sheet and cut another 2 sleeves, this time 40 inches wide, figuring that if it was too large, it would be easier to cut down than to size up. I attached the sleeves to the gussets and sewed down the sleeve ends, then cinched the wrists and attached the cuffs. To set the shoulder end of the sleeves and get the poof even, I pinned it at a few points first, then drew the thread and arranged the cinching evenly between the pins. Here's a look at the progress after day 1, with sleeves, collar, and cuffs attached. The shirt is inside out as you see it here. I'll do neckline, hem, and inside seams once I'm happy with everything else. I've clearly overcompensated on the sleeves poof factor. I could tell that I'll need to take this apart and cut them down a bit. I also noticed that the sleeves hang far off my shoulders beyond what I'm comfortable with. So when I go to reattach them later, I'll pull a couple of inches off the width of the shoulders. In addition to narrowing the sleeve width to 30 inches, I also shortened the sleeves by about 5 inches, so that they're still poof, but it doesn't flop down past my wrists. I try on the sleeve just to make sure that my hand can get through the wrist end and that it can button snugly around my arm. I had made some mistakes with the collar in the first go-around, so I took this opportunity to remove and try again. It's not terribly complex as collars go, it's just important that it's attached with no gaps. I figured out later that there's really no way to do the French seam correctly on the collar, so I just left it with the jagged hem at the back under my neck. Finally, once I'm satisfied that I have all of the pieces correctly sized and sewn into place, I can start to trim off my hem allowances and finish with the French seams all around. Once that was done, and before the final reveal, I ran it and all of the scraps through the wash with some sodium percarbonate. I was still kind of bothered by the smell of someone else's old sheets, and a scoop of sodium percarbonate is enough to eliminate strange odors. Here you have the final product. It's a little bunchy at the chest, and I don't think it's the most flattering thing I've ever worn, but in a better fabric, I think this could be super comfortable.
For the finishing, I made some fabric buttons and button loops out of scraps. Inside of the buttons is mostly scraps of the hems that I cut off. I also used one of the fancy settings on my sewing machine to give the edges around the neckline and bottom hem a little leaf pattern.
So there it is, a pirate shirt made from an old bed sheet dug out of a skip. I'm not sure that this is my favorite shirt ever to wear, but it was a really good sort of sample to make in order to know all the measurements and what I would have to do to make another one, maybe out of some nicer fabric next time. So I probably will wear it once or twice, but I'm not sure it's going to be in the regular weekly rotation. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Do let me know in the comments what you think. If you think I should have done some of these things differently, if you enjoyed this video, or would like to see anything similar to this in the future. And be sure to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'll see you next time.